The first scream rose just as the sun broke the ridge. It wasn't the sound of pain. It was the kind that split open the air with disbelief. They'd found her again. Down by the bend of the Rio Blanco, where the cottonwoods twist their roots into the water, a young woman knelt beside a dead calf. The calf's neck was torn, its eyes glassy, and though she'd been the one to try and stitch the wound shut, it didn't matter. In that small frontier town called Dry Creek Hollow, truth traveled slower than rumor. Her name was Etta Vance, 23, quiet, with ash-blonde hair always tied in a low braid that fell against the rope-burn scar at her collarbone. Folks called her the Widow Witch, though she'd never been married. The sheriff said the calf was just a coyote's work, but the preacher's wife said otherwise. She called the storm last week, didn't she? You all saw that lightning strike near the church. By noon, the town had gathered. By evening, the rope was ready. They dragged Etta to the gallows post, a weathered oak that had seen more hangings than weddings. The air smelled of gun oil, wet dust, and fear. Someone spat. Another muttered a prayer. And from the crowd stepped a man with eyes the color of old brass. He was tall, shoulders bowed under a sun-bleached duster, his boots worn near through. A rifle hung at his back, but he didn't reach for it. Caleb Harlan. Ex-soldier. Drifter. The kind of man who didn't believe in angels, but had killed enough men to know demons were real. He'd seen her before, weeks earlier, mending a broken wagon axle in front of the mercantile. Her hands had moved steady as wind over wheat. She'd looked up once, said softly, "I can't stay long." He hadn't known what she meant until now. The sheriff tied the noose and read the charge. Witchcraft. Desecration of livestock. Consorting with the dead. Caleb's hand twitched near his coat. The crowd's murmur swelled, half excitement, half dread. The preacher raised his voice, calling down God's judgment. But before he could speak the final word, a small sound broke the silence. A child's voice. Said a boy, no older than 7, holding a wildflower. "She ain't bad. She saved my dog when he got bit." The preacher glared, but the words had cracked the spell. Men looked down. Women shifted uneasily. And for a single heartbeat, mercy hung in the dust-choked air. Caleb saw it. And he knew. He stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "Untie her," he said. "You hang her, and you'll answer to me." No one moved. The sheriff's eyes darted between the preacher and the rifleman. Then Caleb took another step closer, his spurs ringing sharp as iron truth. The rope creaked. The noose loosened. By sunset, the gallows stood empty. But Etta's eyes, grey as riverstone, didn't thank him. She just said again, "I can't stay long." And before the night was done, she was gone, leaving behind a single thing, the rope that should have killed her, still tied in a loop, hanging from the oak branch. That rope would burn before the story was over. The wind turned cruel that night. By the time Caleb found her tracks heading west, the sky was black as gunmetal and smelled like rain on stone. He followed the faint indent of her bare feet along the canyon trail, each print half swallowed by dust and tumbleweed. He didn't know why he followed. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe the way she'd said, "I can't stay long," like she'd already accepted the world had no room for her. Or maybe he was tired of watching good people die for bad reasons. Ghost Canyon wasn't a place you rode through after sundown. The old tribe said the wind there could whisper your sins back to you, in the voices of those you'd buried. Caleb had enough of those to fill the canyon twice over. His horse, an old sorrel named Pike, snorted and balked at the entrance. Caleb whispered, "Easy, boy." Far off, lightning flashed white against the cliffs. He saw her for just an instant, Etta, moving fast along the ridge, her dress torn, hair loose, clutching something against her chest. He shouted her name. The echo came back like a ghost. When he reached her camp near dawn, she'd already built a small fire. She didn't flinch when he stepped into the light. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. Caleb lowered himself onto a rock, the firelight carving the scars on his hands into old maps. "They'd have killed you," he said. "They will still try," she replied. "That town needs someone to blame." She showed him what she carried, a small pouch, tied with red twine. Inside were dried herbs, a locket, and a piece of the burned calf hide. "I was trying to heal it," she whispered. "Not curse it." Caleb didn't know the ways of her craft, but he could see the truth in her eyes, the raw, aching kind that don't know how to lie. He took a slow breath. "Where you heading?" "South," she said. "Past the border. There's a place called San Isidro. They don't ask questions there." The fire cracked. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind brushing against the canyon walls, carrying with it a low hum, like distant chanting. Finally, Caleb said, "You can ride with me till the ridge. It's safer." Her eyes narrowed. "Why help me?" He looked into the fire, the flames reflected in his weathered face. "Because once," he said, "I didn't." She didn't ask what he meant. But when she rose to leave, she untied something from her wrist, the small frayed rope the sheriff had used to bind her hands, and dropped it into the fire. The flames hissed. Smoke twisted upward, grey and bitter. It wasn't redemption. But it was a start. Underscore 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 underscore. Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe for more untold Wild West legends. By the third night, the desert turned against them. Thunder rolled like hooves over hollow earth, and rain hit the canyon floor in sheets sharp as glass. Caleb led Pike through the narrow pass while Etta clung to the saddle horn, her cloak soaked, her braid heavy with mud. The trail dissolved into rivulets of red clay. They found shelter under an overhang carved by centuries of wind, a stone mouth in the cliffside that swallowed the firelight whole. Etta trembled by the flames, trying to dry her hands. Caleb unrolled his bedroll in silence. He'd seen too much of war to fear weather, but he could sense another kind of storm building, the human kind. The kind that hunts mercy. "Someone followed us," she whispered. He looked up fast. "How do you know?" She nodded toward the fire. The wind carried their scent before the rain did. He didn't question her. He just loaded his Colt quietly, eyes on the mouth of the cave. Minutes later, 3 silhouettes broke the rain. Men on horseback, their lanterns swinging in the dark. Bounty riders. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a beard thick as winter moss, called out, "Evening, soldier. Ain't you keeping odd company?" Caleb stayed still. "She's wanted for witchcraft, boy. 2 towns north got her name nailed to the church door. $100 cash, dead or alive." Etta didn't move. She stared into the fire, her face unreadable. Caleb spat into the dirt. "100 ain't enough to hang a ghost." The man laughed. "You're either drunk or stupid. Hand her over, and we'll forget we saw you." Caleb rose slowly, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "She ain't yours to take." The standoff lasted only a heartbeat before lightning split the sky, and with it came the gunfire. Caleb moved like a memory of war, efficient, brutal, quiet. 2 riders fell before they even cleared their holsters. The third tried to run. Etta's voice cut the air. "Stop." He did. Mid-step. The horse beneath him reared and bolted into the dark, as if some invisible rope had snapped between them. When the thunder faded, only the rain remained. Caleb wiped blood from his cheek, breathing heavy. The smell of gunpowder clung to the air like sorrow. Etta knelt beside one of the fallen men, placing her palm on his chest. "Don't," Caleb muttered. "I'm not cursing him," she said. "I'm sending him away." He didn't understand the words she whispered, but the desert did. The wind calmed. The rain softened. When it was over, she looked up at him. "They won't stop coming," she said. "I know," Caleb replied. "Neither will I." Outside, the lightning faded into distance. In the mud, the dying firelight reflected off a small iron badge, one the bounty man had dropped. Caleb picked it up and threw it into the flames. The metal hissed, twisted, and then, quietly, broke. Underscore 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 underscore. Subscribe now. The next chapter's fire still burns in the dark. When the sun rose again, the desert shimmered with the silence that follows violence. Buzzards circled high. The scent of rain still clung to the rocks, mingled with the copper tang of blood. Caleb buried the dead with his hands, slow, steady, the soldier's way. Edda watched in silence, her face unreadable beneath the dawn light. When he finished, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "Maybe," he said, "but I ain't leaving a man to rot, even if he came gunning in for me." The two rode south through the salt flats until the land turned brittle and pale. They found a trading post at the edge of nowhere, 3 shacks, a windmill, and a man with one eye who sold bullets and whiskey in the same breath. While Caleb bought supplies, Edda stood at the edge of the post, looking toward the horizon. Her wrists still bore the faint purple scars where the rope had bitten deep. The one-eyed trader spat and said, "You'd best keep that which hid. Words travellin'. They say she branded the sheriff's son before she ran." Edda flinched. Caleb stepped forward. "She did no such thing." The man shrugged. "Don't matter. Out here, truth costs more than whiskey." That night they camped beside a dry riverbed. The stars hung low, cold and sharp. Caleb cleaned his rifle while Edda sat apart, tracing something into the dust with a stick, a looping mark, almost like a sigil. "What's that?" he asked. "A mark they burned into my palm," she said, turning her hand. In the firelight, Caleb saw it, a faint scar, the shape of a twisted cross. They said it was the mark of a liar. So everyone know. He looked at her hand for a long time, the fire's reflection trembling in her eyes. "Did you ever lie?" he asked quietly. "Once," she said. "When I told my mother I'd be safe." Caleb didn't speak. He reached into the fire, grabbed a small burning branch, and said, "Hold out your hand." She stared at him, wary, but then she did. Slowly, he pressed the ember against the scar. Smoke rose. She didn't cry out. When he pulled away, the mark had changed, no longer a cross, but a small circle, sealed clean by the burn. "There," he said. "Now it's yours. Not theirs." She looked at him with tears that never fell. "Why would you do that?" "Because no one should carry a lie they didn't tell." The night settled thick and still around them. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried. And in that cry, Caleb felt something stir, a memory of the woman he'd once failed to save, a voice that had begged him not to look away. He looked at Edda now, her hand trembling in her lap, and said, almost to himself, "You said you can't stay long. I say maybe you ain't supposed to." Her gaze met his. "Then let's make the days worth forever." He didn't answer, but the smallest hint of a smile ghosted his weathered face. That night, they buried the last of her shame. Literally. Edda dug a shallow hole in the sand and dropped the burned scrap of rope from the gallows into it. She covered it with both hands, pressing the earth firm. The desert wind sighed, carrying away the last trace of the noose that once claimed her name. Underscore 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 subscribe for more stories of love, loss, and survival on the frontier. They reached San Isidro 4 days later, if you could call it a town. Just a sprawl of clay huts, a crumbling chapel, and the sound of church bells that rang not for prayer, but to keep away the silence. Dust hung in the air like breath that had forgotten how to leave the lungs. Edda dismounted first. Her boots sank into the cracked earth. For the first time since Dry Creek, she didn't look hunted, just tired. Caleb followed, his face hidden under the shadow of his hat. The townsfolk watched them like ghosts watching the living pass by. A grey-haired priest stood outside the chapel door. His cassock was patched, his eyes kind. "You seek mercy or trade?" he asked. Edda answered softly, "Neither. Just a place that don't remember my name." The priest nodded once. "There's a room by the well. No one asks questions there." They stayed 3 nights. Edda helped the women wash linen in the stream, taught the children which herbs eased fever. The old priest said her hands were blessed. But Caleb saw how she still flinched when someone touched her wrist, how her eyes searched the horizon every dusk, as if expecting the smoke of a posse on the wind. On the 4th morning, Caleb woke before dawn. She was sitting outside, wrapped in his old duster, watching the desert bloom under the pale light. In her lap lay a single locket, the one from her pouch, the silver now polished clean. "I can't stay long," she said again. He leaned against the post beside her. "You could try." She shook her head. "I'll bring trouble. Wherever I stop, it follows." He looked out at the ridge, where the sun was just touching the hills. "Maybe that's true," he said. "But I've followed worse things." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the slow creak of the windmill. Then she opened the locket and pressed it into his palm. Inside was a small curl of hair and a single, faded sketch of a young girl. "My sister," she whispered. "She died in Dry Creek. Fever took her. They said I'd curse at her by trying to heal her. That's why they branded me." Caleb closed his fingers around the locket, his throat tight. "I'll carry it," he said. "For how long?" "Till the end of dust." Her lips curved, barely a smile. "Then that's forever." Before noon, she was gone. No trail, no note, just the faint print of her boots leading toward the southern hills. Caleb didn't follow. Not this time. Instead, he walked to the chapel, built a small cairn of stones by the well, and placed the burned piece of rope she'd buried before. He'd carried it without her knowing, all on top. He lit it. The smoke rose thin and white, spiraling into the blue. A child passing by asked, "Mister, what's that for?" He said, "For someone who wasn't what they said she was." Years later, travelers still told of a healer woman who crossed the border and made the desert bloom wherever she went. Some said she became a legend. Caleb knew better. Legends die easy. But truth lingers in the wind. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he'd swear he could hear her voice in the rustle of the mesquite. "Let me make the day's worth forever." And he'd smile, just once, before the fire died low. Underscore 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 subscribe for more haunting Wild West legends of mercy and survival.